The tie caught her eye, first a striking cobalt blue with subtle silver pinstripes that somehow managed to stand out among the sea of conservative neckwear in the crowded conference hall. Delilah Morgan hadn't planned on speaking to anyone during the coffee break at the International Sustainable Architecture Conference, but something about the way the man wore it with such effortless confidence made her fingers tighten around her paper cup. "That's quite possibly the most beautiful tie I've seen all week," she said before she could stop herself, immediately feeling heat rush to her cheeks as the tall stranger turned around. His eyes were kind, deep brown with slight crinkles at the corners that suggested he smiled often. "Thank you," he replied, his voice warm and unexpectedly gentle for someone with such broad shoulders. "My sister picked it out. She claims I have the fashion sense of a colorblind penguin." Delilah laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Well, please tell your sister she has excellent taste. I will, though she'll be insufferable about it." He extended his hand. "I'm Kyle Edwards, Delilah Morgan," she replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering, and she noticed calluses that seemed at odds with his impeccable suit. "Are you presenting today?" "Not this time, just observing." I'm speaking in the afternoon session. Sustainable urban integration using reclaimed materials." She took a sip of her coffee, trying not to wince at how lukewarm it had become. "It's my first major conference presentation." "Nervous, terrified," Delilah admitted with a small laugh, but passionate enough about the subject to push through it. "What brings you to a sustainable architecture conference?" Kyle's response was interrupted by the chime signaling the end of the break. "Looks like we're being summoned back," he said with a hint of regret. "Good luck with your presentation, Delilah Morgan. I'll make sure to attend." Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd with surprising agility for such a tall man. Delilah's presentation went better than she'd expected. Despite the initial nerves that made her voice shake during her introduction, she found her rhythm once she started discussing her projects. The repurposed industrial space in Detroit that her small firm had transformed into affordable housing. The community center in Chicago, built entirely from materials salvaged from demolished buildings. The innovative water conservation systems they'd pioneered in drought-prone areas. She was so focused on her slides and engaging with her audience that she almost missed him sitting in the back row. Kyle Edwards, tie still perfect, watching her with undivided attention. When she concluded to enthusiastic applause, their eyes met briefly across the room, and he gave her a small, appreciative nod that somehow meant more than all the other accolades combined. By the time she had fielded questions and packed up her presentation materials, she figured he'd be long gone. The conference hall was emptying rapidly as attendees rushed to catch trains or grab early dinners before the evening networking event. "That was impressive," came his voice from behind her. Delilah turned, unable to suppress her smile. "You actually came. I said I would." Kyle's expression was serious. "Your work is extraordinary. The way you've integrated sustainability with social responsibility, it's not just good architecture, it's meaningful architecture." His genuine appreciation for her work took her by surprise. Most men she met at these conferences were either trying to mansplain her own field to her or angling for a date. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot." "Are you heading to the reception tonight?" he asked as they walked toward the exit together. "I wasn't planning to." "Those events are usually just a lot of people talking at each other while pretending to listen." Kyle laughed. "Accurate assessment. How about dinner instead? There's a place not far from here that makes a mushroom risotto that might change your life." Delilah hesitated. She hadn't come to Boston looking for anything beyond professional connections, but there was something genuine about Kyle Edwards that intrigued her. "All right," she agreed. "But only if you tell me what really brings you to a sustainable architecture conference, because you never answered earlier." "Deal," he said with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. The restaurant was small and unpretentious, tucked away on a quiet side street. No white tablecloths or snooty waiters, just warm lighting and the kind of comfortable atmosphere that invited conversation. Kyle seemed to know the owner, an older woman who greeted him with familiarity but no fuss, leading them to a corner table partially hidden by a lush potted palm. "So," Delilah said once they'd ordered, "the conference?" Kyle traced the rim of his water glass with one finger. "I'm interested in the intersection of sustainable architecture and affordable housing. Professionally or personally? Both. I run a company that started in construction and has since diversified." Edwards Construction. Delilah tried to recall if she'd heard of it. A faint smile played at his lips. Not quite. Edwards Holdings. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Delilah couldn't place it. "And what does Edwards Holdings do exactly?" "A bit of everything now. We began with construction, expanded into materials manufacturing, then real estate development. These days we're also involved in renewable energy and conservation projects." "Sounds substantial," she remarked. "How many employees?" "Just over 15,000 globally." Delilah nearly choked on her water. 15,000, and you're the CEO, he nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. "You're not just attending the conference," she realized. "You could probably buy the whole venue." Kyle's laugh seemed surprised out of him. "I'd rather not. The acoustics are terrible." Delilah studied him with new eyes, trying to reconcile the unpretentious man across from her with someone who ran a global corporation. "I can't believe I complimented your tie." "It's the best compliment I've received in months," he said earnestly. "Most people who approach me want something." "I just wanted to acknowledge a good tie," she said, still processing. Their food arrived, momentarily diverting the conversation. The risotto was indeed exceptional, creamy with perfectly cooked mushrooms and a hint of truffle. Delilah made an appreciative sound after her first bite. "Told you," Kyle said with evident satisfaction. As they ate, the conversation shifted to Delilah's background. How a girl from a middle-class family in Minnesota had developed a passion for sustainable architecture. Her struggles to establish her small firm in a field dominated by larger companies. The projects she'd fought hardest for, and the ones that kept her awake at night. Kyle listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite obligation. By the time they'd finished their meal and were sharing a tiramisu, Delilah realized 3 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. "I should probably head back to my hotel," she said reluctantly. "I have another presentation tomorrow afternoon." "I'll walk you," Kyle offered. When she began to protest, he added, "It's on my way, I promise." The night air was cool and crisp as they strolled through Boston's streets. Their conversation continued to flow easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that felt natural rather than awkward. When they reached Delilah's modest hotel, Kyle stopped at the entrance. "I enjoyed tonight," he said simply. "So did I," Delilah replied. "Thank you for the dinner and for coming to my presentation. Would you have dinner with me again tomorrow?" He asked, his confidence seemingly tempered with genuine uncertainty about her answer. Delilah considered him for a moment. There was something refreshingly straightforward about Kyle Edwards, billionaire CEO or not. "Yes," she decided. "I would like that." His smile was worth the momentary hesitation. "Until tomorrow, then." He waited until she was safely through the doors before turning to leave back in her room. Delilah kicked off her shoes and flopped onto the bed, her mind racing. She reached for her phone and quickly searched Kyle Edwards Holdings. Page after page of results appeared, including Forbes profiles, business analyses, and charity foundation reports. Photos of Kyle at economic forums, cutting ribbons at building openings, and receiving awards. Kyle Edwards, 32, self-made billionaire who had transformed his father's struggling regional construction company into a global powerhouse. Estimated net worth, $7.8 billion, known for his focus on sustainable development and ethical business practices, notoriously private about his personal life. Delilah set her phone down, overwhelmed. What could someone like him possibly see in her? Her entire firm could fit into a corner of his corporate headquarters. She fell asleep with these thoughts circling in her mind. The next day's conference sessions seemed interminable. Delilah found herself checking the time repeatedly, her mind drifting to their dinner plans. Her own presentation went well, but Kyle wasn't in the audience this time. She tried not to feel disappointed, reminding herself that he probably had actual billion-dollar deals to manage. When she returned to her hotel to change for dinner, she found a small package waiting for her at the front desk. Inside was a silk scarf in shades of blue and silver that perfectly complemented her favorite dress, along with a note. "My sister helped with this one too. Looking forward to tonight." The restaurant he took her to that evening, was a rooftop place with stunning views of Boston Harbor. Unlike the previous night's cozy establishment, this was clearly upscale, but still managed to feel intimate and welcoming. "I hope this isn't too much," Kyle said as they were seated at a prime table overlooking the water. "I wanted you to see this view." "It's beautiful," Delilah admitted, adjusting the new scarf around her shoulders. "Thank you for this, by the way, it's lovely." "It matches your eyes," he said simply. Their dinner conversation ranged from architecture to childhood memories to favorite books. Kyle told her about growing up in rural Pennsylvania, working construction with his father from the age of 14, and the heart attack that had left him in charge of the struggling family business at 23. "Everyone expected me to sell," he explained. "The company was nearly bankrupt and I had no formal business education, but it was my dad's legacy." "So instead you turned it into a billion-dollar enterprise," Delilah said. "Just a minor achievement," he laughed. "It wasn't the plan, I just kept seeing opportunities where others saw obstacles." Like sustainable construction before it was trendy. Exactly. It wasn't just idealism, though that was part of it. I realized early on that sustainability would eventually become a necessity, not a luxury. The companies that adapted first would have an advantage. Delilah nodded, impressed by his foresight. "Smart and ethical, rare combination." "I try," he said modestly. "What about you? What drove you to focus on reclamation projects?" "I grew up in a town where nothing was wasted," she explained. "When something broke, you fixed it. When clothes wore out, they became quilts. The idea of demolishing entire buildings just to build something new always seemed insane to me." "Yet the industry standard," Kyle noted, "which is why I wanted to prove there were alternatives." Her passion animated her face. "Every building has a story. Sometimes it just needs a new chapter, not an ending." Kyle's expression was thoughtful. "Have you ever considered scaling up your approach, beyond individual buildings to entire neighborhoods or districts?" "Constantly," Delilah admitted, "but my firm is small. We don't have the resources for projects of that magnitude." "What if you did?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is this where you offer to buy my company?" "No," Kyle said firmly. "That's not what this is about." Delilah felt a rush of relief, followed by confusion. "Then what are you suggesting?" "A collaboration, perhaps. Edwards Holdings is planning a major urban renewal project in Detroit. We want to make it a model of sustainable redevelopment. Your expertise would be invaluable." "As a consultant," she asked. "As a partner," he clarified. "Equal input on design and implementation." Delilah set down her fork, studying him carefully. "Why me? There are bigger firms with more resources." "Because you understand what most developers don't, that sustainable architecture isn't just about energy efficiency or recycled materials. It's about preserving the soul of a place while giving it new purpose." His gaze was intense. "Also, you're brilliant." She felt her cheeks warm at the directness of his compliment. "I'd need to know more about the project before I could consider it." "Of course," he agreed. "I'll have the preliminary plans sent to you tomorrow." As their dinner concluded, Kyle walked her back to her hotel again. This time, the silence between them felt charged with unspoken possibilities. At the entrance, Delilah turned to face him. "Thank you for tonight, and for the project offer. It's an incredible opportunity." "I should be thanking you," Kyle replied, "for seeing me as just a guy with a nice tie, at least for a little while." The sincerity in his voice made something twist in Delilah's chest. On impulse, she stood on her tiptoes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Kyle." His expression as she pulled away made her breath catch surprise, giving way to something warmer, more intense. "Good night, Delilah," he said softly. The final day of the conference passed in a blur. Delilah attended the closing keynote with only half her attention. The rest focused on the project proposal Kyle had sent over that morning. It was ambitious, the revitalization of a historic industrial district in Detroit, transforming abandoned factories and warehouses into a mixed-use development with affordable housing, green spaces, and community facilities. The scope was far larger than anything she'd tackled before, but the preliminary plans were thoughtful, incorporating many of the principles she advocated. She met Kyle for coffee afterward in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. "I've been reviewing your proposal," she said without preamble. "It's impressive, but," he prompted, sensing her hesitation, "but I need to understand something first. Is this offer because of whatever is happening between us? Because if that's the case, it's not," Kyle interrupted firmly. "I had my team researching partners for this project months before the conference. Your firm was already on our shortlist based on your previous work." Delilah relaxed slightly. "So the timing is just coincidence. The timing of our meeting, yes, the timing of the formal offer. Perhaps accelerated by the fact that I've now had the chance to discuss the project with you directly." He met her gaze steadily. "I won't pretend my personal interest in you doesn't exist, but the professional opportunity stands on its own merits." She believed him, which made her next question harder. "And if I decline the project, then I hope you'd still consider having dinner with me the next time we're in the same city," he said with a slight smile. "My interest in you goes beyond business, Delilah. But I respect the boundaries between personal and professional." His straightforwardness was refreshing. No games, no manipulation, just honest expression of interest coupled with respect for her autonomy. It made her decision easier. "I think I'd like to accept both offers," she said. The project and the dinner, the smile that spread across Kyle's face made her heart skip. "I was hoping you'd say that." Over the next 6 months, the Detroit project became the center of Delilah's professional life. Her firm collaborated closely with Edwards Holdings, her team working alongside Kyle's experts to develop plans that would revitalize the district while preserving its industrial heritage. Weekly video conferences often extended beyond business discussions into personal conversations, and Kyle found reasons to visit Detroit with increasing frequency. Their relationship evolved naturally alongside their professional collaboration. Weekend visits turned into stolen days together in various cities, hiking in Colorado, exploring museums in Chicago, quiet evenings in Kyle's surprisingly modest New York apartment. Delilah discovered that despite his wealth, Kyle preferred simple pleasures, good books, homemade meals, long walks with no particular destination. 4 months into the project, they faced their first major obstacle when local opposition emerged to a key element of the development plan. A community group feared the renovation would lead to gentrification and displacement, despite the affordable housing provisions. "We need to listen to them," Delilah insisted during a tense meeting with the project team. "Their concerns are valid," Kyle nodded in agreement. "Arrange a community forum. I want to hear directly from the residents." The forum was heated at times, with residents expressing deep-seated distrust based on previous broken promises from developers. Kyle and Delilah stayed for hours, listening to every concern, taking notes, answering questions honestly even when the answers weren't what people wanted to hear. Afterward, they revised the plans substantially, increasing the percentage of affordable units and adding community ownership structures that would ensure long-term benefits for existing residents. The process delayed the project timeline, but ultimately strengthened the design. "You were right," Kyle told Delilah late one night as they reviewed the revised plans in her small office. "This is better." "We were right together," she corrected, squeezing his hand. "That's why we make a good team." The look he gave her then was full of something that made her heart race. They'd been taking things slowly, both conscious of the complications their professional relationship could create. But in that moment, the careful boundaries they'd established seemed suddenly insufficient. Kyle set aside the plans and pulled her gently to her feet. "Do you know what I think about every day?" he asked softly, his hands warm on her waist. What? She whispered, already knowing the answer somehow. The blue tie. How differently my life might have gone if you hadn't noticed it. I'm glad I spoke up, Delilah said, reaching up to trace his jawline. So am I. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with an intensity that left her breathless. When they finally pulled apart, his expression was serious. I'm falling in love with you, Delilah Morgan. I think I have been since you called out my tie at that conference. Her heart soared at his words. I'm already there, she admitted. Loving you. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Detroit project took place exactly 1 year after they'd met. As Kyle and Delilah stood together with community representatives to turn the ceremonial first shovels of dirt, the significance of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. What had begun with a simple compliment had transformed into something neither could have anticipated: a partnership that encompassed both their professional ambitions and their personal happiness. The project garnered national attention, praised as a model for sustainable urban renewal that prioritized community needs alongside environmental considerations. Delilah's small firm expanded to handle the increased workload, while Kyle's company established a dedicated division focused exclusively on sustainable redevelopment projects. As their professional success grew, so did their personal connection. Kyle proposed on a chilly autumn evening during a walk through the partially completed Detroit project, getting down on one knee among the construction materials and scaffolding. It might seem unromantic, he said, holding out a simple but stunning ring, but I wanted to ask you here where it all came together. Where your vision and mine created something neither of us could have built alone. Delilah's yes echoed among the unfinished walls that would soon become homes for hundreds of families. Their wedding took place 6 months later in a renovated historic greenhouse that Delilah's firm had saved from demolition years earlier. It was a relatively small affair, with family, close friends, and key team members from both their companies. Kyle's sister, the one with the excellent taste in ties, served as Delilah's maid of honor, the two having formed a close friendship during the wedding planning. I never thought complimenting a stranger's tie would lead to this, Delilah said as they shared their first dance. Kyle's arms tightened around her. Best marketing investment I ever made, she laughed, leaning her head against his chest. Your sister really does have excellent taste. In ties and in sisters-in-law, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. 3 years later, the Detroit project stood complete, a vibrant community where once abandoned buildings now housed families, businesses, and community spaces. Sustainable features were integrated throughout, from solar arrays on restored historic rooftops to rainwater collection systems that fed community gardens. On the day of the official opening ceremony, Delilah and Kyle walked the site together early in the morning before the crowds arrived. Their 2-year-old daughter, Kate, rode on Kyle's shoulders, her small hands clutching her father's hair. What do you think, little one? Delilah asked, reaching up to adjust Kate's tiny sun hat. Do you like what Mommy and Daddy built? Big, Kate declared, her favorite word of the moment. Kyle laughed, the sound mingling with the morning breeze. She's not wrong. As they stood looking out over the development, Delilah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The project represented everything she had always believed in, that buildings could be both sustainable and beautiful, that communities could be revitalized without losing their identity, that progress didn't have to come at the expense of history. But even more meaningful was the family she and Kyle had built together. A partnership that had begun with a simple compliment about a tie had grown into a shared life filled with purpose, respect, and deep, abiding love. What's next for us? She asked, slipping her hand into his. Kyle smiled, the same warm smile that had first drawn her to him at that conference years ago. Whatever we decide to build together. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the renewed landscape, Delilah knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced everything else side by side, making something beautiful from what others might have discarded, creating a future built on the strongest foundation of all: Love that had begun with the simplest of connections and grown into something neither could have imagined on their own.